The high-tech solution, Florida is deploying robotic rabbits to help capture invasive Burmese pythons in the Everglades.
At sunrise in the Florida Everglades, something strange began to move in the grass. They looked like harmless rabbits, soft, twitching, and perfectly still. But what hid beneath their fur wasn't alive. Mist clung to the sawgrass as the first light touched the blackwater, and there they sat. Dozens of small forms scattered across the wetland, their ears catching the breeze, their bodies warming under solar panels that glinted like jewels.
Fuel is being unleashed in Florida's Everglades to hunt Burmese pythons.
Officials had quietly released hundreds of them, each powered by the sun and built for one chilling purpose: to lure out the Everglades' most unstoppable predator. Locals called it madness. Scientists called it genius. But when the first cameras started rolling, what they captured changed everything. The question hanging over the swamp that morning was simple and terrifying. Did Florida just outsmart nature or unleash something it can't control? Chapter 1. The Silent Invasion. The Everglades at dawn glows like a living mirror. Sawgrass shivers over slow water. Herons stand motionless, stitched into the landscape like statues carved from patience itself. But beneath that beauty lies one of the most devastated ecosystems in America. For decades, this vast wilderness has been under silent attack. The invader isn't a pollution spill or a sprawling development project. It's alive, coiled, and utterly unstoppable. The Burmese python, a predator born in the jungles of Southeast Asia, has turned Florida's wetlands into its own private empire.
The snakes are an invasive species that have wreaked havoc on the Everglades ecosystem.
The invasion didn't begin as an accident of nature, but as a human mistake, slow and stupid and irreversible. In the 1980s and 1990s, the exotic pet trade flourished across America, and baby pythons were sold as harmless curiosities, glossy, beautifully patterned, docile enough to rest in a child's hands. But those pets grew. Within a few short years, many reached 15 to 20 feet, powerful enough to crush a deer or wrestle an alligator to death. Owners unprepared for the responsibility began releasing them into canals, swamps, and backyards, one snake at a time, each one a seed. Then, in 1992, Hurricane Andrew tore through South Florida like the wrath of something ancient, destroying reptile facilities and freeing countless snakes into the wild.
32 years ago, this was the day where Hurricane Andrew made landfall at 5:05 in the morning.
Those escapes seeded the population that would later engulf the Everglades. The python's new world was paradise. The Everglades offered year-round warmth, endless cover, and prey that had never evolved to fear a giant constrictor. With no natural predators and the ability to lay up to 100 eggs a year, the population exploded. Biologists now estimate that tens of thousands roam South Florida, maybe more, hidden in a landscape too vast and intricate to count. What they've done to the food web is catastrophic. In areas where pythons dominate, raccoons have nearly vanished. Opossums are gone. Marsh rabbits, once so common you could see them on every trail, have been erased from entire regions. Even deer and bobcats, creatures built for survival, have felt the pressure. A single python was found with a full-grown deer inside its stomach, the outline still visible through stretched scales. In another incident, a python was filmed locked in combat with an alligator. Both of them died. The loss of these species isn't just tragic, it's systemic. When small mammals disappear, raptors lose their food supply. When scavengers vanish, decaying bodies linger longer, altering soil nutrients and changing the chemistry of the land itself. The Everglades, a fragile lattice of interdependence, has started to break down under the python's relentless pressure. Scientists used to report the presence of marsh rabbits in almost every survey. Now there are whole zones where they've gone silent. The fight for the Everglades has become a war humans are slowly losing. Hunters wade chest-deep through blackwater, guided by drones and headlamps, but for every python they catch, dozens more hatch unseen, slipping into the reeds before a human foot comes close. Millions of dollars have been poured into removal programs, bounties, and research, but the tide hasn't turned. Pythons have adapted perfectly. Humans are running out of options. Chapter 2. Bounty Hunts and Broken Math. When officials realized just how unstoppable the invasion had become, they did what humans often do when faced with a wild problem. They turned it into a competition. Cash prizes, public glory, and the thrill of the hunt. In 2013, Florida launched the first ever Python Challenge, an open call to anyone brave enough to step into the swamp. The concept was bold, maybe even desperate. Armed citizens with basic training set them loose for a month and pay for every snake brought back.
Catching pythons, that's a part of it, but it's educating the public. So when you're in the Everglades, all of the groups that recreate in the Everglades, to learn how to remove a python safely.
On paper, it sounded like a victory waiting to happen. In reality, it became a study in frustration and human endurance. The first challenge drew more than 1,600 participants from across the country. Hunters came with airboats, machetes, and flashlights strapped to their foreheads. Television crews followed, turning the Everglades into a surreal blend of reality show and survival contest. For days, the swamp echoed with the sound of motors and shouts as people scanned the reeds for the telltale shimmer of scales. The media loved it, but the numbers told a harsher story. After weeks of effort, the combined haul totaled just 68 snakes, 68 out of tens of thousands believed to roam those wetlands. It was a fraction so small, biologists barely noticed the difference. Florida had no choice but to continue. The Python Challenge became a yearly event with even larger prizes, more training, and better promotion. Hunters learned from their mistakes, deploying thermal scopes and night vision equipment. Some managed to catch dozens of snakes in a single season. The winners were celebrated as champions. One of them captured a python more than 17 feet long. But the scientists' conclusions were always the same. The population curve kept climbing. Officials realized that seasonal competitions were mostly spectacle and moved toward a more professional strategy. In 2017, the South Florida Water Management District launched the Python Elimination Program. This wasn't a game anymore, it was a job. Paid hunters received training, were licensed, and earned an hourly wage with bonuses for every python captured. The longer the snake, the higher the payout. Contractors went on night patrols along the canals, scanning for movement under the moonlight, their boats sliding through black water. It was exhausting, dangerous, and often solitary work. But it was effective for a while. The number of pythons removed increased year after year. The population in the wild did not decrease. It was as if every time you pulled one snake out, two more materialized from the reeds. The math was brutal.
100 eggs at a time, and they have no natural predators in the Florida Everglades.
Millions of dollars spent chasing serpents across 1.5 million acres, and the returns kept shrinking. New technologies were tested. Scientists deployed what they called Judas snakes, pythons fitted with radio transmitters to lead hunters to breeding grounds. It helped, but only a little. The Everglades was just too big, too tangled, too full of places for a cold-blooded ghost to hide. By the end of the 2010s, officials had to accept a bitter truth. You couldn't beat the python threat with human effort alone. No matter how skilled or relentless the hunters were, they couldn't compete with a creature designed to be invisible. It was like trying to prune a wildfire with scissors. Every hunt, every capture, every bounty paid, it was all just that. So the question changed. If hunters couldn't outfight the snakes, could something else outsmart them? The answer began with a wagging tail and a powerful nose. Chapter 3. Truman and Eleanor, the detector dogs. When the bounty programs failed to make a dent, wildlife managers realized they needed a new kind of hunter, one that didn't rely on sight, luck, or endurance, but on pure instinct. In 2020, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission launched a small but daring experiment. 2 dogs, trained like detectives, would be sent into the swamps to do what humans could not: smell the invisible.
Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission's detector dogs were in the field today demonstrating their expertise at finding the invasive snakes.
Their names were Truman and Eleanor. Truman, a black Labrador, had the easygoing face of a family pet, but the focus of a soldier. Eleanor, a Dutch shepherd with alert amber eyes, was bred for precision and courage. For months, they were trained to recognize the faint, musky odor that Burmese pythons leave behind, a scent humans can't detect but that lingers in grass and mud long after the snake has passed. Trainers hid pythons in crates, in tall weeds, even under waterlogged logs, until the dogs could find them every time. Once in the field, they worked on long leads, handlers following close behind with GPS trackers as the dogs sniffed, paused, and pulled toward unseen targets. The results came fast. In their first month, the duo helped capture several large snakes that had eluded human crews for weeks. Truman's tail would stiffen, Eleanor would circle, nose low, and suddenly freeze, the universal sign that prey was near. Moments later, a handler's flashlight beam would catch the slow ripple of scales. It was astonishing to watch. These dogs were finding pythons in minutes where biologists had searched for hours. Word spread quickly across the agencies. For the first time, it felt like humans had a fighting chance. But victories in the Everglades always come at a price. The swamp is brutal, scorching, humid, and dangerous in every direction. Sawgrass slices through paws. The water hides alligators and cottonmouths that can kill with a single strike. Handlers had to outfit their dogs with cooling vests, protective boots, and constant water breaks. Even then, the work was grueling. But despite the difficulties, the dog teams revealed something extraordinary: a pattern. Every time they tracked a python, the scent trail led to nests, egg clusters, or other snakes hiding nearby. This discovery suggested something broader, a map of the invasion. Scientists began charting these finds, identifying breeding zones they'd never known existed.
A slightly different approach to finding pythons in that they're not visually searching for pythons. They're actually trained really to search using their smell.
The dogs weren't just catching snakes, they were exposing the structure of the problem. Still, no matter how effective Truman and Eleanor were, two dogs couldn't cover 1.5 million acres. Scaling the program would require hundreds of teams, millions in funding, and constant upkeep. The method was brilliant but small scale. A tool, not a solution. The dogs had proved one thing clearly: creative tactics worked. But the Everglades demanded more than strength or instinct. Their success opened a new and unavoidable question. If scent could draw the snakes out, what if bait could pull them even closer? Could the very thing they hunted become the key to victory? That question would lead scientists down an unsettling path, one that blurred the line between biology, ethics, and desperation. Chapter 4: Live Bait and Moral Lines. Desperation breeds innovation and sometimes controversy. After years of failed hunts and limited success with detector dogs, Florida's scientists found themselves staring at a difficult truth. To defeat the pythons, they needed to understand what the snakes wanted most. The answer was simple and unsettling. They wanted rabbits. Specifically, marsh rabbits, once among the most common mammals in the Everglades, now nearly wiped out. The question that followed was as risky as it was bold. Could live rabbits lure pythons out of hiding? At first, the idea sparked outrage, but for some biologists, it was an unavoidable next step. Pythons are ambush predators, drawn by scent and heat rather than movement alone. In small, controlled studies, researchers built secure pens along swampy trails and placed live rabbits inside. The pens were designed to protect the animals from direct attack while still letting their scent and heat spread through the environment. What happened next stunned the teams. Within weeks, pythons began appearing, one after another. In a single study site, more than 20 snakes slithered toward the enclosures over the course of a few months. The rabbits, terrified but unharmed behind wire barriers, had become magnets for one of the most elusive predators on Earth. The findings were undeniable. The presence of rabbits could concentrate python activity, making them easier to locate and capture. It was the first real evidence that prey attraction might succeed where brute hunting had failed. But success came at a moral cost. Images of trembling live rabbits surrounded by constrictors provoked outrage from animal welfare groups and even from scientists within the project. Public pressure mounted. Critics labeled the experiments barbaric, arguing that no species, no matter how invasive, justified sacrificing innocent animals. Officials were forced to respond, and soon funding for live bait trials was withdrawn entirely. Yet it was the program's cancellation that made the next breakthrough possible. The principle had been established. It was the method, not the goal, that needed fixing. The next question was obvious. Could they mimic the scent, heat, and subtle movement of a marsh rabbit without using a living creature? Engineers, biologists, and conservation tech specialists began collaborating, fusing wildlife science with robotics. They studied every sensory trigger that attracted a python: infrared heat signatures, thermal contrast against cool swamp air, and the faint musky scent of mammal fur. Every detail was treated as a data point for a mechanical replica. The rabbit blueprint was born. Chapter 5: The Robo-Rabbits. Engineering the decoy. Scientists envisioned a rugged decoy that could emit heat, release synthetic scent, and replicate the twitchy movements of a real rabbit.
These solar-powered robo-bunnies move, emit heat, and soon they'll even smell like a real rabbit.
It wasn't just about attracting pythons, it was about capturing data. Every encounter could be filmed and logged by embedded cameras and sensors, turning the decoy into a field researcher itself. The project moved from concept to prototype quietly, shielded by the controversy that had preceded it. For the first time, technology offered a way to fight back without killing. But one question remained: would the snakes fall for it, or would they smell the deception beneath the fur? That answer came soon enough as Florida unleashed its first army of robotic rabbits into the wild. When the first batch rolled into the Everglades, few believed the experiment would work. At sunrise, the prototypes looked almost comical. Small, fur-covered decoys bristling with wires, sensors, and tiny solar panels glinting in the mist. But these were no toys. Each one represented years of frustration, innovation, and millions in funding. They were designed to fool a predator that had outsmarted every trap so far. Engineers called them robo-rabbits. Wildlife officers called them a last hope. Each decoy was a marvel of practical design. Built from weather-resistant polymers coated with synthetic fur and layered with thermal pads, they emitted a heat signature nearly identical to that of a living marsh rabbit. Tiny scent emitters released a chemical compound mimicking rabbit musk drifting on the swamp breeze. Even the ears could twitch, powered by silent micromotors. To a python's heat-sensitive tongue, these machines were indistinguishable from the real thing. Hidden within was a camera linked to a motion-triggered transmitter. Whenever something slithered close, the system activated, sending an alert to biologists stationed miles away. Powering all of this was sunlight. Each decoy carried a small solar panel connected to rechargeable batteries, allowing it to operate for weeks without maintenance. They were anchored inside protective pens, enclosures strong enough to survive curious raccoons, storms, and the occasional alligator. The goal wasn't to kill the snakes directly, but to lure them into monitored zones where trained teams could move in for capture. Chapter 6: First Contact. When the pythons came. When the first 120 units were deployed across key hotspots, no one expected immediate results. The swamp had crushed optimism before, but this time the Everglades reacted differently. Within days, field cameras began capturing scenes no one had witnessed from such close range. Large pythons approached the decoys slowly, tongues flicking, bodies glistening under moonlight. Some struck immediately, coiling around the motionless rabbits as if they were living prey. Others hesitated, sensing something off, then vanished back into the darkness. Soon, the data began flooding in. The robotic rabbits weren't just attracting snakes, they were mapping their movements. Every camera activation added another dot to a growing digital map of python hotspots. Researchers could now pinpoint where breeding females congregated, which canals guided their travel, and what times the snakes were most active. The decoys had become both bait and an intelligence network. In a control room 50 miles from the swamp, a handler named Maria watched her screen as a new alert blinked red. She zoomed in on the feed, a 14-foot python, thick as her arm, wrapping itself slowly around a decoy's torso. The rabbit's camera captured every scale, every muscle contraction. Maria keyed her radio. 2 field agents were 10 minutes out. By the time they arrived, the snake was still there, mesmerized by synthetic warmth it couldn't understand. They caught it in under 3 minutes.
It's helping to remove Burmese pythons from the wild in record numbers.
Still, challenges remained. Each unit cost roughly $4,000, and surviving the swamp's heat and humidity required constant testing. Funding would determine whether this could scale into a statewide system, but the psychological shift was priceless. For the first time in decades, researchers felt they were on offense.
Now, the state invested $2 million into this year's budget to hunt pythons. The governor says he is working with the Florida legislature to make sure that funding stays in place.
The Everglades exhales. Somewhere in the reeds, a sensor blinks. The data streams back to labs where scientists study not just where the snakes are, but how they think, how they hunt, and where they might go next. The decoys have given Florida something it hasn't had in years, the ability to see the invisible. But questions linger in the humid air. Can technology truly correct a mistake humans made, or does it simply rewrite the rules of the same old fight? If you bait a predator into the open, what else follows it out? The snakes may adapt. Funding may dry up. The swamp may learn new tricks. But for now, the robotic rabbits sit in the grass, twitching softly under the sun, waiting for the next shadow to slide through the water. If this kind of deep dive matters to you, leave a comment below. Should technology lead wildlife recovery, or are we just teaching nature to fight a different war? Like and subscribe for more stories where science meets survival, and click the next video to see what happens when another broken ecosystem fights back.